Hey everybody, this is John Zlonowski. I'm going to be doing a voice recording of Chapter 8, Crimes Involving Property and Society. I'm doing a voice recording because there's many times you don't have your book on you. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're out, and you can just listen and study at the same time. And obviously it's going to help me as well. So we'll jump right in. The first section we're going through is theft, which is Chapter 812, Florida statutes. This involves that the suspect, three things here: knowingly and unlawfully obtained or used or tried to obtain or to use the property of the victim. They did it intentionally to deprive the victim of their right to it or any benefit from it, and took the property for their own use or the use of anyone not entitled to it. So keep in mind that theft and burglary are property crimes and lack this direct person-to-person element. So robbery is a crime against a person, theft and burglary are property crimes. Property can be anything of value, and it includes real property, tangible or intangible, personal property, and services. Services are anything of value that results from someone's physical or mental labor or skill. Some examples of services are repairs or improvements to property, professional services, private, public, or government communication, transportation, power, water, or sanitation services, lodging accommodations, admissions to places of exhibition or entertainment. Let's see, we got another highlighted section here. If the value of property stolen during a theft is $100 or more, but less than $750, the offense is a first-degree misdemeanor of petty theft. If the person who commits petty theft has two or more convictions for any theft, the crime becomes a third-degree felony. Do note that it is a conviction, not a charge. If there are two convictions or more, then the petty theft becomes a third-degree felony. Theft of property valued at less than $100, or if the value of the property cannot be established, is a second-degree misdemeanor. So to recap real quick, if it's between $100 or $750, the offense is first-degree misdemeanor, and that's petty theft. Two or more convictions, it becomes a third-degree felony. And if it's less than $100 or the value cannot be determined, then it's just simply a second-degree misdemeanor. Grand theft involves the theft of an item with a value of $750 or more, and the theft of an item specified by statute regardless of its value, or the theft of an item with a value of $100 or more from a dwelling or from the enclosed area of land surrounding a dwelling. Grand theft can be a felony of first, second, or third degree. So just to quickly recap, $750 or more, it's grand theft, or if it falls within the category of the statutes of certain things that are stolen, such as all weapons stolen, are automatically grand theft. And do remember that if you steal within a dwelling or an enclosed area of that dwelling of 100 or more, it automatically becomes a felony. Theft also includes identity theft and fraud, and it's not just the property of funds or assets. Florida law reclassifies theft to a higher degree if the victim is a person 65 or older. Keep in note that an LPO is a loss prevention officer. Let's see what we got here. Attain a suspect's statement before making an arrest when it comes to theft. So make sure to get that statement before making an arrest, and photograph the items before returning any stolen property. Make sure to notify your supervisor if you are making an arrest, which is kind of dumb when it comes to theft, but it's in the book, so we'll focus on that. So now we're moving on to retail theft here. You can arrest someone for retail theft without a warrant, even when the offense is not committed in your presence. So it's a misdemeanor exception. Retail theft involves someone working alone or conspiring with others to, four things here: take merchandise, money, or negotiable financial or legal documents, alter or remove a label or price tag, transfer merchandise from one container to another, remove a shopping cart with the intention of depriving the merchant of the items or their full retail value. And then also note with retail theft that it is a felony to possess, use, or attempt to use an anti-shoplifting or inventory control device countermeasure to defeat the security scanner. Next, when you respond to a motor vehicle theft, make sure to call dispatch to find out if the vehicle was towed for repossession. And keep in mind that a person may borrow a friend's vehicle and not return it to the owner. This would be a civil matter, so agency policies and procedures. When you're responding to the recovery of a stolen vehicle, make sure to notify dispatch so they can report the recovery to FCIC and NCIC so they can remove it. Make sure to also notify the vehicle owner. When you're responding to a stolen property incident, if the sale price for property is substantially below the fair market value, the property may be stolen. If the victim locates their stolen property in a pawn shop, you can put a hold on the item or seize it as evidence. Now, when you're dealing in stolen property, Let me just go right into this. Stolen property is when a person sells, transfers, distributes, or otherwise disposes of stolen property, knowing or having reason to know that the property is in fact stolen. This person commits the crime of dealing in stolen property. Now, if you have probable cause to believe that a suspect stole an item and the suspect resists reasonable efforts to recover the property, charge the suspect with resisting in addition to theft. Now we're going to move on to lesson 2 here, which is criminal mischief, trespassing, and burglary. Criminal mischief. The definition of criminal mischief is the willful and malicious destruction of property belonging to another person. Examples of this are graffiti or other acts of vandalism. For criminal mischief, document 3 things: that the suspect injured or damaged real or personal property, the property belonged to the complainant, and the injury or damage was willful and malicious. Make sure to photograph the damage for your report. Next, the Florida statutes enhance the penalties for criminal mischief based upon several factors, including the value of property. We got 5 factors here. Criminal mischief is a second-degree misdemeanor if the property damage is less than $200. So under $200, second-degree misdemeanor. It is a first-degree misdemeanor if the damage is greater than $200 but less than $1,000. Now, if the property value damage totals $1,000 or more, the crime is a third-degree felony. So it just goes up a step. So 200, under 200 is second degree, first degree is between 2 and 1,000, and then third degree felony is 1,000 or more. If the suspect has 1 or more prior convictions, so 1 or more prior convictions, then the offense will become a felony, regardless of the amount of damage. Any person who willfully and maliciously damages any place of worship or religious article is guilty of a third degree felony if the damage is over $200. Next, we're moving here to trespassing, outlined in Chapter 810 of the Florida statutes, and it occurs when 3 things happen. Actually, they're all ors. So one of these 3. The suspect willfully entered or remained in a structure, conveyance, or property without being authorized, licensed, or invited, or the suspect willfully entered or remained in a property after the owner tells them to leave, or when a trespassing notice is posted, or having been authorized, licensed, or invited, the suspect was warned by a person authorized by the owner or lessee of the premises to depart, and the suspect refused to depart. In trespassing, a person authorized means an owner or lessee or their agent or any law enforcement officer whose agency has received written authorization from the owner to communicate that they're trespassed. These trespassing offenses are misdemeanors when, you got 7 examples here of trespassing offenses that are misdemeanors. 1 is a notice against entering or remaining is communicated or posted, and the person just disregards it. Someone enters or remains on a property and intends to commit another offense. Someone stays on the premise after law enforcement told them to leave. A transient person living in a residential property refuses to leave after law enforcement directed them to leave. Someone is not authorized, licensed, or invited to enter or stay on a school campus. A student who is suspended or expelled enters or stays on a school campus or any other campus the school owns. Or someone is on a school campus without legitimate business to be there. Those are trespassing offenses that are misdemeanors. Now we're going to move on to trespassing offenses that are felonies. There are 8 examples here. Trespassing on a designated posted commercial horticultural property, trespassing on a posted agricultural site for testing and research, an agricultural chemical manufacturing facility, trespassing on school property while in possession of a firearm or weapon, trespassing on a designated posted domestic violence shelter, launching a projectile using a firearm, bow, or crossbow across someone else's land with the intent of taking or killing an animal, entering and remaining on a designated posted construction site, trespassing on a legally posted operational area of an airport with the intent to injure a person, damage property, or impede operations. So now from trespassing, we're going to move here to burglary. Burglary is the unlawful entry into any structure with the intent to commit a crime. Now, penalties are more severe for a dwelling than a structure of conveyance because obviously people live there. For burglary, document that the suspect did at least 2 of the 3 following. 1. Entered a structure or conveyance owned by or in the possession of the complainant. At the time of entering the structure or conveyance, had the intent to commit a crime in that structure or conveyance. Or was not licensed or invited to enter the structure or conveyance, and the premises were not open to the public at the time of the entering. Then we move on here to trespassing. This is under burglary. So trespassing involves being somewhere you do not own without the owner's permission. Burglary also involves being somewhere you do not own without the owner's permission, but with the intention to commit another crime, such as theft. So keep in mind, trespassing is just where you're not supposed to be, where burglary is you're not supposed to be, plus committing some sort of crime, usually theft. The Florida statutes enhance the penalties for burglary when 5 things happen. Any one of these 5 things happen. The suspect commits assault or battery during a burglary. The suspect is armed. The suspect uses a vehicle to cause damage to the property. The suspect causes more than $1,000 of damage to the property. The dwelling, structure, or conveyance was occupied at the time of the burglary. Those are the 5 examples of when the burglary is enhanced. Now, burglary tools. Burglary tools may include screwdrivers, pliers, wrenches, pry bars, or spark plugs, but can also be anything used to gain entry during a burglary, such as a rock or concrete block. For the possession of burglary tools crime, document that the suspect intended to commit burglary or trespass and had in their possession a tool, machine, or implement they intended to use in committing trespass or burglary. Now we're moving on how to respond to a burglary. Burglary is one of the crimes that you will investigate most frequently. Keep that noted. If the burglary is in progress, notify your supervisor, call for backup, set a perimeter, and request additional resources. If the burglary is not in process, obtain a statement from the victim. So remember, if the burglary is not in process, you're just getting a statement. If it is in progress, you're pulling out everything. You're notifying your supervisor, you're calling for backup, you're making a perimeter, additional resources. From there, we're moving on to protecting archaeological sites. It is a misdemeanor to walk on an archaeological site and remove an object. So if you're walking on it and removing an object, it's a misdemeanor. It is a felony to do that and dig up the site to retrieve an object. So if you're just walking on it and you remove something, misdemeanor. If you are walking on it and then you dig something up and take that becomes a felony. We're going to pause here, and I'm going to start another video for the next couple lessons here in Chapter 9. All right, so we're still in Chapter 8. We're moving on here to Unit 1, Lesson 3, White-Collar Crimes. We're going to start with fraud. Fraud is the intentional falsification of the truth to induce another person or other entity to part with something of value or to surrender their legal right to it. Current forms of fraud are credit card fraud, bank fraud, cash and fraudulent check, and identity theft. There are 2 types of in-progress fraud. You have forgery and uttering. So forgery is just simply forging some sort of document. So it's altering, forging, counterfeiting a public record, certificate, legal document, bill of exchange, promissory note with the intent to injure or defraud someone. Where uttering, on the other hand, is like presenting that forgery as being real. So actually handing it to somebody, using it, etc. So the definition of uttering is knowingly exhibiting or publishing a document or attempting to cash a check by claiming the check and the endorsement are real. Defrauding someone is a third-degree felony under Florida law by uttering. So the most common types of forgery an officer may encounter are forged signatures or endorsements on a check, use of a fictitious name, and forgery by altering a signature. So then we move on here to a fraudulent check. The primary complainant for an in-progress fraudulent check is the financial institution. The victim is the person from whom the funds were drawn. So the complainant is a financial institution, and the victim is the person that the funds were taken from. That's for a fraudulent check. These will be interviewed by economic crime investigators. They'll typically investigate fraud. So next we'll move here to credit card fraud. Credit card fraud is the unlawful use of a credit card to obtain property, goods, or services. Skimming is the act of extracting a customer's credit card information by using a skimming device. And it is a felony if a suspect fraudulently uses a victim's credit card within a 6-month period 3 times or more, or charges $100 or more on a victim's card. So if someone has your card and they use it 3 or more times in a 6-month period, or they do $100 charges, that moves it up to a felony. The primary complainant for most credit card offenses is the account holder. The primary victim of the theft is the issuing financial institution. So let me compare these two real quick, fraudulent checks and credit card fraud. So with a fraudulent check, keep in mind that the complainant is the financial institution, where the victim is the person with whom the funds were taken from. Where with credit card fraud, it's the opposite. The complainant is the account holder, and then the main victim is the financial institution. So just remember that they're opposite. The check, the victim is the person, where the credit card, since it's not your money because it's credit, the bank is the victim. Next, we'll move to telephone scams. Just know what a VoIP is. That's a voice over internet protocol. And this allows someone to create a phone number and use it anywhere in the world where they can connect to the internet. Basically saying, a question comes up where they're like, hey, this person says they're in Portland, Oregon. Does that mean that's where they are? And no, because they can be using a voice over internet protocol and they could be anywhere in the world. They could be in Singapore and you can't track that. So then we'll move here to phishing. Phishing uses fake digital communication that mirrors a legitimate business to obtain personal and financial information from unsuspecting victims. So example of phishing would be an email in your AOL account saying, hey, your password was changed on your whatever, log in and change it, and then you give them your information and they steal your stuff. So keep that in mind. Do you know what an IP address is? That's Internet Protocol. Identity theft. So identity theft is the unlawful possession or use of a person's identifying information to commit acts of fraud, such as apply for credit card or loans, acquire services, establish or take over accounts, and commit crimes. Personal identification information, PII, includes these following 9 things: Social Security number, official state-issued or U.S.-issued driver's license or identification number, permanent residential card number, government passport number, employee or taxpayer ID, Medicaid or food assistance number, bank account number, credit or debit card number, or medical records. Do note that your agency may have a Florida identity theft victim kit to provide to the victim. Next, we're going to move on to Lesson 4, Animal Cruelty. Some signs of animal abuse. Let me rock through those. We have 8 of them. Starvation, parasites, the collar is too tight or heavy. That one seems like it could be a test question, which causes strangulation or death. Lack of needed medical attention, lack of adequate shelter, living conditions that include excess feces, garbage, broken glass, inappropriate size cage for the animal to stand up and turn around, weakness, limping, or the inability to walk properly. Out of those 8, I would say the collar too tight or too heavy, or the inappropriately sized cage seem the most not as obvious. So then we'll move on to the elements of cruelty to animals. Document that the suspect committed a misdemeanor cruelty to animal by these 4 things: unnecessarily overloading or overdriving or tormenting an animal, depriving an animal of necessary food or shelter, unnecessarily mutilating or killing any animal or causing the same to be done, carrying in or on a vehicle any animal in a cruel or inhumane manner. A person who intentionally commits an act to any animal, or a person who owns or has the custody or control of any animal and fails to act, which results in the cruel death or excess of repeated infliction or unnecessary pain or suffering, or causes this to be done, commits aggravated animal cruelty. In Florida, aggravated animal cruelty is a felony. So basically, you're intentionally committing or letting it happen in excess or repeated infliction that's unnecessary. That would then become aggravated animal cruelty, and that is a felony, where all the other ones are just misdemeanors. So the elements of fighting or baiting animals include breeding, training, and promoting any rooster or other bird, canine, bear, or other animals for the purpose of fighting. So basically any animal for the purpose of fighting, breeding, training, or promoting, that would fall into that category. So responding to animal cruelty. If you are unsure if the incident is animal cruelty, animal control or a veterinarian can help determine that. So if you're not sure, call one of them. They'll probably come out and they'll help you. Just note that if you can't solve it, that's who you call. So now we'll move on to loitering or prowling and disorderly behavior. So we'll start with loitering or prowling. So the definition of that is to linger or hang around in a public area without any apparent purpose, for being there in a place at a time or in a manner not usual for law-abiding people, and under circumstances that raise alarm or immediate concern for the safety of people or property in the vicinity. Then you have some things to consider, whether to be alarmed or concerned, are if the person flees when a law enforcement officer appears, refuses to identify themselves, attempt to conceal themselves or any object, and they will not explain why they're there or what they're doing. So basically, if the person are doing any of those 4, it's basically giving you reasonable suspicion to determine that, okay, someone's probably loitering or prowling here. With loitering or prowling, the charge will require articulating in your report and in court the totality of circumstances to support their arrest. So when it comes to loitering or prowling, this is it's not black and white, it's a very gray one, and you have to articulate based on multiple factors, the totality of circumstances, exactly why you're there to support, why you're making the arrest here. Do note to be respectful and give them an opportunity to identify themselves and explain their presence and conduct. So that's really big with loitering or prowling. You have to let them explain themselves. If they give you a great reason, oh, my car broke down, this is whatever, someone's coming to meet me, and it makes sense, and you can corroborate that story, you have to be able to let them go. But if they give you some BS story about, oh, I'm meeting my friend and this and that, whatever kind of example, I can imagine this being on the test, that just doesn't make sense and you can't corroborate any of that, then that would fall then under loitering or prowling. unless there was probable cause of some other offense, if the person voluntarily explains their presence and conduct, and the explanation eases your alarm, release them without charge. So kind of like I was saying above, if they're giving you a really good reason why they're there, you have to release them. But if you fail to release them, it says here in the book, the court may dismiss the case and you may face civil liability for false arrest. So like I said, be very careful. Make sure you articulate with loitering or prowling. So then we move on here to breach of the peace / disorderly conduct. Breach of the peace or disorderly conduct is not a catch-all statute. However, it does include brawling, fighting, or an affray. Now, an affray occurs when someone consents to fight with another person to terrorize other people in a public place. Do note that urinating in public is also disorderly conduct, and it is not considered an exposure of sexual organs. So if that comes up in the test, urinating in public is disorderly conduct, not exposure of organs. To meet the conditions of breach of peace or disorderly conduct, the person's actions must endanger the safety of another person or property and occur in a public place or on a public transportation causing a public disturbance. So for the breach of the peace, it has to put people in danger, and there has to be people there that are actually breaching that peace. Keep a note that a public place means anywhere the public has a right to be and to go, such as a grocery store or hospital. For the offense of breach of peace or disorderly conduct, document that the suspect's action did these 4 things. It corrupts public morale, outrages public sense of decency, affects the peace and quiet of people who may witness it, or is a brawl or a fight. A person who simply curses at others or officers may not be arrested for disorderly conduct unless other factors are present that would threaten the safety of an officer or others. Unless a person's words actually incite a reaction from onlookers that might create a danger to others, such as shouting fire in a crowded theater, freedom of speech protects the person from arrest. When you are on duty, you cannot be a victim of breach of the peace. I bet you this will be on the test. If someone's cussing at you, freaking out, making a big scene, and it's towards you and you're on duty, there is no breach of peace. So the answer will be nothing is happening. You can't do anything. Take no legal action. We'll move on to disorderly intoxication. Disorderly intoxication, document that the suspect was intoxicated and endangered the safety of another person or property, or was intoxicated or drank alcohol in a public place or public transportation and caused a public disturbance. Taken alone, the person's admission that they consumed substances is not enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they were under the influence. However, consider this admission along with other evidence. Next, we're responding to an open house party. An open house party is a social gathering at a residence that is legal unless minors at the party consume alcohol or drugs. So for the offense and crime of an open house party, you're required to have these 5 things. The person was 18 or older that had the house party. That person had control over the residence at the time of the party. They allowed an open house party at the residence, and then they allowed a minor to possess or consume alcohol or drugs at the residence during the party, and knew that the minor possessed or consumed alcohol or drugs at the residence during the party. So I'm assuming if I throw a house party and I don't know a minor is there and I don't know the minor is drinking, you probably can't charge for an open house party because it says that you have to know that not only did they possess and consume, but they did it there in your house and you knew about it. So do note that if the parents are home while the open house party was going on or knew of the party and the presence of alcohol or drugs, the offense may be contributing to the delinquency of a minor in addition to an open house party violation. So if the parents are home and they know about the party, then now you got 2. You got open house party violation and you have contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Now we're moving on to the last lesson in Chapter 8. Yep, this concludes Chapter 8, which is illicit drugs and vice crimes. So let's start here with illicit use of prescription drugs. Recent changes in the prescription drug monitoring program have contributed to a rise in opioid abuse. So if they ask what's contributed to the rise in opioid abuse, it is the recent changes in the prescription drug monitoring program. It is illegal to drive under the influence of medical marijuana, just as it would be with any other prescription medication that impairs your ability to drive. To get somebody for the possession of a controlled substance crime, document these 3 things. Knew that the illicit controlled substance was present, exercised control or ownership over the illicit controlled substance, and knew the substance was an illicit controlled substance. Now, we're going to clarify some definitions here. So first is possession. Possession means to have personal charge of or exercise the right of ownership, management, or control over the thing possessed. Possession may be actual, constructive, or joint. So that's possession, and then here are the three things that fall under possession. You have actual possession, means the controlled substance is in the hands of or on the suspect or in a container in the hands of the suspect or so close to be within ready reach and is under the control of the suspect. And make sure you know this under actual possession. Mere proximity to a controlled substance is not sufficient to establish possession over the substance when it is not in a place that the suspect has control. So if it's just near you, like it's in the trunk or it's 10, 20 feet away, that's not considered actual possession. Actual possession is it's in your hand or it's in a container in your hand or it's so close, let's just say it's literally on the seat next to you a foot away. That would be actual possession. Then we move on to constructive possession. This means the controlled substance is in a place over which the suspect has control or in which the suspect has concealed it. Then you have joint possession, means two or more suspects may jointly possess an article, exercising control over it. In that case, each of these suspects is in possession of that article. So the test question comes up where you have a driver and a passenger and they both say it's theirs. What type of possession? This is joint possession. Now, if it's in the person's hand, they say what type of possession is, that's actual possession. Now, constructive possession, it means they have a place, they have control over that place. So I would assume this would be it's in your vehicle or it's in your house. That would be constructive possession. If a suspect does not have exclusive possession of a controlled substance, do not infer or assume the suspect had knowledge of his presence. Be aware that a person's presence in a room or building where there are drugs or other contraband does not necessarily mean the person has committed a crime. So if I come over to somebody's house and I go in their room, the cops barge in, just because I'm there, does not mean that I have exclusive possession, and it does not mean that it's mine. So don't automatically assume that. You obviously have to do your due diligence and figure that out on your own. Let's move on to drug trafficking here. Chapter 893 of the Florida statutes outlines the quantities of or weight of specific illicit controlled substances that increase a possession charge to a drug trafficking charge. So these numbers I'm about to give you are to increase it from possession to drug trafficking, which is a much, much larger charge. So we're going to start with cannabis. It has to be excess of 25 pounds or excess of 300 plants. With cocaine, it has to be in excess of 28 grams. With hydrocodone, excess of 28 grams. And then meth, it's excess of 14 grams. And there's three more here. MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, is excess of 1 kilogram. Oxycodone is excess of 30 kilograms. And LSD acid is excess of 1 gram. And keep in mind that trafficking in illicit drugs is a felony, and Florida law requires a minimum mandatory prison sentence for drug trafficking. So you're automatically, based on what you have, you're automatically going here no matter what for that mandatory minimum. Then we're going to move on here to drug paraphernalia. Drug paraphernalia is all equipment, products, and materials of any kind that are used or intended to one of these five things: plant, propagate, cultivate, grow, or harvest; manufacture, compound, convert, produce, process, or prepare; test or analyze; pack, repack, store; or contain, conceal, inject, ingest, inhale, or otherwise introduce a controlled substance into the human body. That's what drug paraphernalia is. So keep in mind that pipes, rolling paper, straws, or spoons are not drug paraphernalia. So remember, on the test, if they ask, hey, is this spoon drug paraphernalia? Is this pipe drug paraphernalia, rolling paper, straws? The answer is no, until you can prove that they are being used or intended to be used to deliver an illicit drugs. So if they ask you, hey, there's a straw over there on the counter, is that drug paraphernalia? No, unless you can prove that it's being used. Possession of drug paraphernalia, if you can prove it's being used for drugs, is a misdemeanor. So a pipe can be used for tobacco, which is legal. So that I can see that being a question on the test where they ask, hey, there's a tobacco pipe on the counter. Maybe there's no other drugs present. Would that be considered drug paraphernalia? The answer is no. So then we're going to move on here to responding to possession of a controlled substance. Before making an arrest for possession of illicit drugs, conduct a presumptive field test of the substance using a kit provided by your agency. So always make sure to test and verify that it is a drug. Then we're going to move on here to vice crimes. Vice crimes include offenses such as alcohol and tobacco violations, gambling, and prostitution. So remember, alcohol, tobacco, gambling, prostitution, those are vice crimes. Alcohol and tobacco violations are the vice crimes that most frequently involve people younger than 21. So younger than 21, alcohol and tobacco violations are vice crimes that are most frequent. Now, any adult that provides someone younger than 21 with alcohol or tobacco commits a misdemeanor. Possession of alcohol or tobacco by someone younger than 21 is a misdemeanor. So if you find someone younger than 21 with alcohol or tobacco, it's a misdemeanor. It's also a misdemeanor if adult is giving someone younger than 21 alcohol or tobacco. Then we're going to move on. For gambling, document that the suspect played or engaged in a game of chance, whether it's cards, roulette, dice, dominoes, or other games, at any place, by any device, for money or other thing of value. So it doesn't have to be money. So if a question comes up on the test, does it have to be money to be gambling? The answer is no. It could be anything of value. It could be my pair of shoes. It could be this phone, whatever. Next, we're going to move on to responding to prostitution. If the person is younger than 18, the law requires that you take them into custody and contact DCF. Then we're going to move to organized crime. Well, let me jump back there. So just remember that if the person's younger than 18, you're automatically taking them. You don't got to sit there and prove all this other stuff. If they're under 18 and they're doing prostitution, you automatically take them into custody and you're contacting the Center for Families. To move on to organized crime. An organized crime operation has these basic characteristics. There are 4 of them. It has a specific structure, usually hierarchy or paramilitary. It has both criminal businesses and legitimate for-profit businesses. It provides a product or service in a particular market and rarely shares areas of crime or territory with other groups. And final, the loss of one source of income will not necessarily eliminate its profit. So keep in mind that some of the methods law enforcement use to combat organized crime are asset forfeiture, concentration on vice offenses, intelligence gathering, interagency cooperation, and prosecution under the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization, which is RICO. So to recap RICO, it is Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organization. And that concludes Chapter 8.